community groups, welcome. So glad that you've been able to tune in today. I think we have an excellent discussion based on an amazing sermon that we had. Now, if you aren't familiar, we are 3 weeks into our series called God's Playlist. And this week we are following up on the top hit of last week based out of Psalm 23. We're continuing this story. And so I'm going to invite you to turn to Psalm chapter 23. And today we're really just going to camp out in verse 4. And I think we got a couple things to talk about that lend themselves specifically to a group like this. And what I mean is to a community, a gathered people with the same attitude, hopefully, the same mindset, and the same goals. Now, before we talk about it, let's make sure that we go to God's Word. And God's Word says this in Psalm chapter 23, verse 4. It says, "Even when I go through the darkest valley, I fear no danger, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Now, I think what we can take, community group, I think what we can take from this, we need to really look at some of what God has to say and think about how it applies to us. Now, whenever I say it applies to us, you're like, yeah, dude, I've been in church forever. I understand that God's Word speaks to me. But I say us intentionally because I think what God can do through a passage like this that seems like it speaks specifically to a person, or it might isolate a person, it actually can bring our attention to what we can contribute to a community, specifically the sheepfold of the Good Shepherd. Now, let's start at the bottom and let's work our way up. He says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. It's weird to think of a rod and a staff as tools of comfort, but I think Pastor Chris did an excellent job really explaining that to us, recognizing that the rod may be a defensive weapon to beat away dangerous prey and animals, while the staff was a tool used to bring the sheep back into the fold. It's important for us to recognize that as God is talking about utilizing tools to bring comfort to his sheep flock, we need to understand that the tools God uses are always obviously going to be in his possession. And what I think is important for us as a community group is to think about the fact that God has us in his possession. And then we can ask ourselves the question, how is God using me to bring comfort to his sheepfold? Now, understand, for a shepherd's crook, right, the staff to be used effectively, there had to be a wayward sheep. There had to be some sheep trailing away from the crowd or from the flock. And in that shepherd's presence of mind and in his faithfulness to the sheepfold, he would reach out and pull that sheep back into the community. Now, I think where we are in this really weird time of COVID, I think that many of us have just been driven to isolation. And maybe we're digitally, virtually communing today, but we still feel so alone. What I would encourage you, community group, is to recognize is that God has placed you in a time like this, in a group like this, to care for the flock. Are you a tool of comfort that God is using to bring comfort to his flock? There may be some of us within this group that are feeling isolated, feeling alone, feeling driven away, or feeling cast out, or even honestly believing the lies of the enemy that tells us that we have no place in a place like this. I would encourage you, community groups, to make sure that you're really caring for the souls of the people who are in your group, not just answering a bunch of questions. The questions are important, but man, let's not miss the opportunity that God has given us to love on each other, to build each other up, to comfort those of us who are feeling like we are in the throes of the darkest valley. Now, I'll say this. You may think to yourself, well, I don't have all of the resources or the training to bring comfort to the people around us. I just want us to remember that it's not that you are the one who is responsible for mustering up courage and comfort to instill into other people. We recognize that the comfort we find here is found in the presence of the shepherd. He says that I will fear no danger regardless of the darkness around me, because we recognize that you are with me. God is the one who brings the comfort. He just uses faithful people to help that process. Now, community groups, I pray as you have these conversations today, as you answer these questions, I pray that your deepest goal would be to glorify God in the way that you are able to build each other up and to comfort the people around us. Just take some time today to look out for each other. Take some time to dig deep with each other in this group, and ultimately take time to point each person in this group back to the Good Shepherd who is able to not just provide, but also provide comfort. So community groups, thank you guys for tuning in today. I pray that you're blessed today. Bye-bye.